After losing his father, Ethan let the family restaurant wither. Under the Madrid rain, his hands held memories while his eyes searched for answers in the silence. But upon meeting Clara, a talented chef working as a waitress, he discovered that life offers second chances. Among stoves and flavors, two wounded souls found a way to make the Garden of Dreams flourish again. If this story of loss and hope moved you, show it with a like. And tell us, how do you think this story of love and overcoming will end? The Madrid morning slipped between the buildings like a cold sigh. The sky, tinged with a near-violet grey, seemed to announce rain that never came. Ethan Alvarez adjusted his trench coat as he gazed at the worn sign of the Garden of Dreams. His fingers, accustomed to signing multi-million-dollar contracts, now firmly held a folded newspaper, his only shield on this self-imposed mission. At 53, the wrinkles around his eyes revealed as much success as loneliness. He had bought the restaurant chain just 3 months ago, but the financial reports failed to explain why this particular location, the first one his father founded, was slowly dying. He didn't trust the cold numbers on the spreadsheets. He needed to see, feel, and understand. He pushed the door and the chime of a bell announced his arrival. The interior smelled of olive oil and freshly baked bread, but also of disillusionment. The dark wood tables, distributed with mathematical precision, hosted a few silent diners. Ethan chose a table by the window, from where he could observe everything without drawing attention. "Good morning, sir. What will you be having?" The female voice snapped him out of his thoughts. He looked up and met hazel eyes that attempted to smile. The woman, around 28, wore the restaurant's black and white uniform with a dignity that contrasted with the wear stains on the sleeves. "The dish of the day, please," he replied, in a deliberately neutral tone. "Right away, sir," she said, and as she turned, she murmured without realizing, "Just another day in hell." Ethan felt as if those words were small needles stabbing his chest. He watched the waitress walk away, her slightly slumped shoulders betraying a fatigue that went beyond the physical. Her name tag read, Clara Morales. While waiting, he critically studied the room. A man in an immaculate suit and a severe expression walked around, adjusting a fork's position here, quietly, reprimanding a waiter there. The employees seemed to shrink as he passed, like flowers wilting before a sudden frost. When Clara returned with a steaming lamb stew, Ethan couldn't hold back. "If you could change one thing here, what would it be?" he asked, feigning casualness. The question seemed to surprise her, as if no one had been interested in her opinion for a long time. A fleeting smile, the first genuine one, briefly lit up her face. Everything. The food, the bosses, and the air. People. Forget how to dream here. And with those words, she planted a seed in Ethan's heart that would soon flourish. Ethan's office on the top floor of the Alvarez building was a monument to corporate minimalism. White walls, black furniture, and windows that offered a panoramic view of Madrid. On clear days, he could see as far as the Sierra de Guadarrama, but today his gaze was fixed on the folder his assistant, Charles Ibanez, had placed on his desk. "Here is all the information on Clara Morales." "Sir," said Charles, a meticulous man who had worked for him for 10 years. "I must say your request seemed unusual." Ethan nodded, offering no explanations. "Thank you, Charles. Anything I should know before reading this?" The assistant hesitated for a moment. "Ms. Morales has an impressive CV. Graduated with honors in gastronomy from the University of Salamanca. She worked at El Ciervo Blanco, a Michelin-starred restaurant, until its closure 2 years ago. After that, nothing notable. Until the Garden of Dreams. El Ciervo Blanco." Ethan frowned. "Martin Vega's restaurant." "The same. It closed due to financial problems after Vega's divorce. Apparently half the team, including Ms. Morales, were left jobless overnight." Once alone, Ethan opened the folder. Photographs of Clara receiving a student award, local newspaper clippings praising her culinary innovations, and a letter of recommendation signed by Martin Vega himself. In all the images, her eyes reflected a passion that contrasted painfully with the dull look of the waitress he had met. The phone interrupted his reflections. "Mr. Alvarez, the board is waiting in the conference room," announced his secretary's voice. The meeting was brief and tense. Ethan presented the last quarter's reports without mentioning his visit to the restaurant. When Ernest Salazar, the financial director, suggested closing the Garden of Dreams to optimize resources, Ethan felt a silent anger grow inside him. The location has sentimental value, he replied dryly. My father opened it 40 years ago. With all due respect, Mr. Alvarez, Salazar interjected with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sentiments don't generate profit. Ethan remembered Clara's words. People forget how to dream here. And perhaps that was precisely the problem. The meeting is adjourned, he announced, standing up. We won't make hasty decisions. Back in his office, he contemplated the city as the afternoon drew in. The sky was tinged with orange and purple, colors too beautiful for a corporate world where everything was reduced to numbers. He picked up the phone and dialed a number. Charles, I need you to book a table at the Garden of Dreams for tomorrow, in my name. And I want you to call a meeting with the entire restaurant management team for next week. Tell them a representative from the new administration will be attending. He had made a decision. It was time to see what happened when the invisible owner became visible. Ethan's second visit to the restaurant was completely different. This time, the maitre d' greeted him with an exaggerated bow and escorted him to the best table, next to a small decorative fountain that emitted a barely audible watery murmur beneath the clinking of cutlery and conversations. It's an honor to have you here, Mr. Alvarez, said the maitre d', a man with slicked back hair and a practiced smile. Mr. Gale will personally attend to you. While he waited, he observed how the restaurant's atmosphere had subtly changed. The waiters moved with an artificial stiffness, the smiles seemed painted on, and nervousness floated in the air like cheap perfume. In the distance, he spotted Clara, who looked at him with surprise and perhaps disappointment upon recognizing him. Marcus Gale, the manager, appeared with the grandiosity of a peacock. He wore an impeccable black suit, and his angular face contorted into a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. Mr. Alvarez, what a pleasant surprise, his voice was honeyed. Allow me to personally recommend our specialties. Ethan nodded, studying the man's every gesture. He noticed how, between phrases, Gale shot sharp glances at the staff, silently demanding perfection. Actually, Ethan interrupted, I'd like to try the dish of the day, the one they serve to all customers. The manager's smile faltered for an instant. Of course, although we have more distinguished options for someone in your position. The dish of the day will be perfect, and I'd like Ms. Morales to serve me. Gale couldn't hide his bewilderment. Clara? She's just a waitress, sir. I can assign you our best. I said Ms. Morales, Ethan repeated firmly. Minutes later, Clara approached his table with a cautious expression. Her eyes reflected a mixture of curiosity and distrust. Good afternoon, Mr. Alvarez. Her tone was formal, distant. Did you wish for the dish of the day? That's right, Clara. And please, call me Ethan, he replied, offering her a genuine smile. As you prefer, sir, she answered, maintaining professional distance. I'll bring your order right away. When she returned with the stew, Ethan noticed it was visibly inferior to the one he had tasted the day before. The meat seemed dry and the presentation was sloppy. This isn't what I ate yesterday, he commented. Clara looked to both sides, ensuring no one was listening. Yesterday you received the normal dish. Today you received the dish for the owner, she whispered. Extra salt and appearance, less flavor and substance. Mr. Gale's orders. Ethan felt a pang of shame. What had his father's legacy become? Sit down with me for a moment, he requested. That would cost me my job, sir, she replied, with a sad smile. I promise it won't, he insisted, and something in his tone must have convinced her, because after hesitating for a moment, Clara took the chair across from him. From the bar, Gale watched them with a tormented expression. In the small office located behind the kitchen, Marcus Gale vented his frustration on Helen Matos, the former manager who now served as an administrative assistant. The walls, too thin, barely muffled his voice. How could you allow Morales to serve Mr. Alvarez? Do you know what's at stake? Helen, a 50-year-old woman with tired but dignified eyes, held his gaze without blinking. It was a direct order from the owner, Marcus. I couldn't contradict him. You and that girl are conspiring against me. He hissed. Don't think I don't see how you defend her. In the kitchen, the cooks worked in tense silence, pretending not to hear the argument. Michael, the head chef, a hefty man with surprisingly delicate hands, prepared the star dessert, flan with orange sauce, a recipe that, although no one openly admitted it, had been Clara's creation. The door opened abruptly, and Gale emerged, adjusting his tie like someone sheathing a weapon. "Mr. Alvarez has left," he announced, regaining his false composure. "Michael, we're changing the menu tomorrow. No experimenting, back to the classics. And you," he pointed to a young assistant, "clean those ovens before you leave. I don't care if you finish at midnight." Meanwhile, in the main room, Clara collected the plates from the table Ethan had just vacated. Beneath the napkin, she found a card with an address and a time. La Oliva Bistro, 9 p.m. "We have a pending conversation." The waitress put the card in her uniform pocket, feeling a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. What did the owner really want? Was he planning to close the restaurant as the rumors suggested? Across the city, Ethan entered his empty apartment. He poured himself a glass of red wine and contemplated the family photographs adorning the shelf. In one of them, a man with a kind face and lively eyes proudly held an apron with the Garden of Dreams original logo, a red rose on a gold background. "What would you think now, Dad?" Ethan murmured to the silence. "Your garden has become a desert." He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Charles, I need you to investigate something else. I want to know everything about Marcus Gale, especially how he became manager and what happened to the previous administrator, Helen Matos. And one more thing," he paused, "find out if there are any pending labor lawsuits against the Garden of Dreams." That night, as the city submerged into darkness, 3 people contemplated the same sky with very different thoughts. Clara, from the window of her small apartment, wondered if she should go to the meeting. Helen, sitting in her kitchen, mentally reviewed the injustices accumulated over the years. And Ethan, in the solitude of his penthouse, drew up a plan to bring his father's Garden of Dreams back to life. La Oliva Bistro was a discreet place in the heart of the La Latina neighborhood. Wooden tables without tablecloths, walls decorated with old oil presses, and a quiet atmosphere that invited confidences. Ethan arrived first and chose a secluded table, next to a small olive tree growing in a ceramic pot. When Clara appeared at the entrance, hesitating for a moment, Ethan noticed the change in her appearance. She had replaced the uniform with a simple blue dress and wore her hair down, framing a face that, free of tension, revealed a serene beauty. "You came," he said, rising to greet her. "Curiosity outweighed prudence," she replied, taking a seat. "Although I don't understand why the owner of a restaurant chain wants to talk to a simple waitress." Ethan smiled, gesturing to the waiter to bring the wine he had selected. "There are no simple waitresses, Clara. Only people trapped in circumstances that don't reflect their true worth. Like you, graduated with honors in gastronomy from the University of Salamanca." She raised an eyebrow, surprised. "I see you've done your research. Call me Ethan, please. And yes, I like to know who I'm talking to." The waiter served a Ribera del Duero red wine. Clara tasted it with the skill of someone who knows the ritual. 6 months in a barrel, cherry notes, and a spicy finish, she commented, almost without thinking. "Good choice." Ethan watched her with renewed interest. "Why is a chef with your training and talent waiting tables at the Garden of Dreams?" Clara sighed, contemplating the garnet liquid swirling in her glass. "Life doesn't always respect plans. When El Ciervo Blanco closed, I tried to find work at other high-level restaurants, but without recent references, the doors closed. I accepted the waitressing job as temporary, but days turned into weeks, and weeks into months," he completed. She nodded with a melancholic smile. "Do you know the worst part? It's not serving tables. It's watching them ruin recipes that could be magnificent. It's hearing customers say the food isn't bad when it could be extraordinary. If you could change the Garden of Dreams, what would you do?" Ethan asked, leaning towards her. The question seemed to light a fire in Clara. Her eyes sparkled, and her hands began to passionately gesticulate as she spoke. "I would use real Spanish ingredients. I would make dishes that speak of our land, but with a contemporary touch. I would respect tradition without being a slave to it. And above all, I would treat people like family, not machines." Ethan listened, fascinated by the transformation. This was the real Clara, the one that had been buried under layers of resignation and routine. "And what if I told you that you could make that vision a reality?" he suggested. She laughed, shaking her head. "I'd say the wine is stronger than it looks. That doesn't happen with people like me. People like you. People without connections, without capital, without important last names," she explained, shrugging. The world of haute cuisine is a closed circle. Ethan looked at her intensely, remembering his own struggle to earn respect after inheriting his father's empire. Circles are made to be broken, Clara, and gardens are made to be cultivated. As the night progressed and the glasses emptied, neither noticed the figure observing them from the bar, taking notes on their phone with a malicious smile. On Monday morning, the Alvarez Group conference room had an unusually tense atmosphere. Ethan, dressed in a dark grey suit that emphasized his authority, chaired the table. To his right, Charles organized a series of folders with red labels. Across from them, Marcus Gale tried to maintain his composure, although a slight twitch in his left eye betrayed his nervousness. "Thank you for coming on such short notice, Mr. Gale," Ethan began in a neutral tone. "This meeting will be brief." Gale attempted a conciliatory smile. "Always at the disposal of the management, Mr. Alvarez. If it's about the last quarter's numbers, I can explain." "We are not here to talk about numbers," Ethan interrupted, opening one of the folders, "but about people." Charles slid several documents toward Gale. They were copies of labor complaints, sworn statements, and photographs of text messages. "Do you recognize these documents?" Ethan asked. Gale's face paled as he flipped through the pages. "There's a misunderstanding, sir. These accusations are unfounded. Is the harassment complaint that Ms. Luisa Mendez withdrew after receiving threats also unfounded?" Ethan pulled out another document. "Or the wrongful dismissal of Helen Matos, demoted to administrative assistant for refusing to falsify inventories?" Gale loosened the knot of his tie, suddenly feeling suffocated. "Mr. Alvarez, in my position, sometimes difficult decisions have to be made. The restaurant needed a firm hand, and what it needed was integrity," Ethan stated, closing the folder with a sharp thud. "You are dismissed, Mr. Gale. Effective immediately." The manager abruptly stood up, knocking over his chair. "You can't do this. I have a contract. I run that restaurant better than anyone." Ethan remained impassive. "Charles, please accompany Mr. Gale to collect his belongings. A security guard will oversee the process," he addressed Gale again. "As for your contract, you can discuss it with our lawyers, who will be happy to review this evidence with you." When the door closed behind them, Ethan allowed himself a moment of weariness. He pulled the worn photograph of his father from his pocket and contemplated it in silence. "First step taken, Dad," he murmured. "Now comes the hard part." That afternoon, Helen Matos received an unexpected call. On the other end of the line, Ethan Alvarez's voice invited her to a private meeting. Meanwhile, in the restaurant kitchen, Clara silently prepared the flan with orange sauce, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Ethan Alvarez's office seemed less intimidating with the afternoon light filtering through the half-open curtains. Helen Matos, sitting across from him, kept her back straight and her hands clasped in her lap, like someone preparing to receive bad news. "Do you know why I called you, Ms. Matos?" Ethan asked, observing her carefully. "I imagine it's to officially inform me of the changes at the Garden of Dreams," she replied in a serene voice. "Rumors about Mr. Gale's dismissal are already circulating." Ethan nodded, admiring the dignity of the woman who had been unjustly demoted. "The rumors are true, but I didn't call you to inform you, but to make you a proposal." He paused. "I want you to return to your position as the restaurant manager." Helen couldn't hide her surprise. "Mr. Alvarez, I've been relegated to administrative tasks for 2 years. Perhaps you should consider someone younger, with new ideas." "What I need is someone with experience and above all with integrity," he replied. "Someone who knew the restaurant in its good times and who understands what the Garden of Dreams means beyond the numbers." The woman remained silent, as if weighing every word. "There is one other person you should consider," she finally said. "Someone with extraordinary talent and their heart in the right place." "Clara Morales," Ethan completed, smiling at Helen's surprised look. "I already have plans for her, if she accepts, but I need someone to handle the operation while she revolutionizes the kitchen." Helen's eyes lit up with understanding. "So that's what you're planning, giving her the opportunity that Gale denied her." "I want Clara Morales to lead the menu renovation," Ethan confirmed. "She has the soul this place lost." Helen smiled for the first time since entering the office. "I accept the position, Mr. Alvarez, with one condition." "Name it." "Allow me to be present when you offer the position to Clara. Her face will be priceless." That same afternoon, the small office that Gale used to occupy hosted an unusual meeting. Clara had been summoned without explanation, and her face reflected confusion upon finding Ethan and Helen. "What's going on?" she asked, looking alternately at both. "Have I done something wrong?" Ethan shook his head, offering her a seat. "Quite the opposite, Clara. We called you because we want to offer you something." He slid a contract across the table. Clara took it with slightly trembling hands and began to read. Her eyes widened increasingly as she assimilated the terms: executive chef, total creative freedom, salary triple her current one. "This must be a mistake," she murmured. "It's not," Ethan replied. "I want you and Helen to bring the Garden of Dreams back to life, to turn it into what it always should have been." Clara placed the contract on the table, her face overshadowed by a sudden distrust. "Why me? There are renowned chefs who would jump at this opportunity." Ethan exchanged a look with Helen, who nodded slightly. "Because they would seek to impose their name. You will seek to honor the restaurants," he replied, "because I saw how your eyes lit up when talking about what this place could be, and because I believe in second chances." Clara remained silent, processing his words. Finally, she took the pen Helen offered her. "I accept, but with two conditions," she declared firmly. "Freedom to create, and truth, always." Ethan extended his hand, sealing a pact that would change the destiny of everyone present. "Truth, always," he repeated. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity at the Garden of Dreams. The restaurant temporarily closed for a renovation, but the kitchen buzzed with experiments, tastings, and passionate discussions. Clara, now in charge, had gathered the team to present her vision. "We are not just going to be another restaurant," she explained, as the cooks and waiters listened attentively. "We are going to tell stories through our dishes, stories of land, tradition, and future." Michael, the head chef who now worked under her direction, watched with a mixture of respect and skepticism as Clara transformed classic recipes with unexpected touches. "The lamb stew will have rosemary and lavender, like the Castilian fields in spring," she said, adjusting proportions. "And the flan. The flan will be our signature." In the evenings, when the team left, Clara stayed alone in the kitchen, working on a special recipe she guarded as a secret. Helen sometimes joined her, bringing back memories of the restaurant's early days. "Ethan's father had that same look when he created a new dish," she commented one night, watching Clara work. "As if he saw something the rest of us couldn't see yet." Clara smiled, still stirring an amber-colored sauce. "What was he like?" "The founder." Helen settled onto a stool, her eyes lost in distant memories. "Antonio Alvarez was pure passion. He didn't have formal training like you, but he understood flavors like few others. I worked with him for 15 years until his illness." She paused. "Ethan is different, more reserved, more calculating. He inherited the empire, but I don't think he inherited the passion for cooking." "Then why is he going to so much trouble with this place?" Clara asked. "A rational businessman would simply sell it." Helen smiled enigmatically. "Perhaps you should ask him yourself. He comes every afternoon to see the progress, although he thinks we don't notice." Indeed, Ethan had acquired the habit of visiting the restaurant after his days at the office. He walked among the freshly painted tables, observed the new uniforms hanging in the locker room, and stopped especially in the kitchen, where the aroma of Clara's creations permeated the air. One afternoon, he found her working on a special dish. Without a word, she offered him a spoonful. "Try this." Ethan obeyed and instinctively closed his eyes. The taste was like a memory transformed into a sensation, familiar and surprising at the same time. "This is," he began, opening his eyes in astonishment. "Your father's original recipe, with a personal touch," she confirmed. "Helen gave me his old recipe book. I hope you don't mind." Ethan shook his head, fighting back an unexpected emotion. "It's perfect," he managed to say. Exactly what he would have wanted. They looked at each other in silence, a tacit understanding flowing between them. They were not just chef and owner. They were two people united by respect for a legacy and the promise of a future. "We reopen on Friday," Clara finally said. "You'll be there, I suppose, as the owner." Ethan smiled, discreetly wiping away a rogue tear. "I'll be there," he replied, "but not as the owner, as the first customer of the new Garden of Dreams." The news of the Garden of Dreams renovation had spread through Madrid like wildfire. Specialized press speculated about the restaurant's new direction, and reservations for the reopening sold out in a matter of hours. However, not everyone looked favorably upon the changes. At Alvarez Group headquarters, Ernest Salazar called an urgent board meeting. Ethan's absence was noticeable. "Gentlemen, I called this meeting because I am concerned about the direction our restaurant division is taking," he began, projecting graphs onto the screen. "Ethan Alvarez is investing a disproportionate amount of resources in a single location, ignoring the optimization potential of the rest of the chain." The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Questioning the owner's decisions was risky, but Salazar, as financial director, had a duty to point out risks. "The Garden of Dreams has been generating losses for years," he continued, "and now instead of closing or selling it, Ethan hires an unknown chef with a Michelin star salary and closes the location for a month for renovations." "We all know the sentimental value that restaurant holds for him," interjected a marketing director. It was the first one his father opened. Salazar offered a condescending smile. "Sentiments aren't traded on the stock exchange, Teresa. Besides, there's something else you should know." He projected a photograph showing Ethan and Clara dining together at La Oliva, laughing like old friends. "Our president is mixing the personal with the professional, and that, gentlemen, never ends well." Meanwhile, oblivious to these machinations, Clara faced her own doubts. Just hours before the grand reopening, she was in the kitchen reviewing every detail with obsessive attention. "Everything is perfect, Clara," Michael assured her, watching her reorganize the ingredients for the third time. "You should rest a bit." She shook her head, still working. "I can't afford to fail, Michael. Not with this opportunity." The chef looked at her with understanding. "You know, when you arrived as a waitress, we all noticed you were different. You saw things the rest of us overlooked," he paused. "Even Gail knew it. That's why he kept you away from the kitchen." Clara stopped, surprised by the revelation. "Why did you never say anything?" Michael shrugged. "Not. All of us are brave, Clara. Some of us just try to survive," he smiled with a certain sadness. "But you came to live." At that moment, Helen entered the kitchen holding an envelope. "This arrived for you, Clara." A messenger brought it. Clara opened the envelope curiously. Inside was a white card with a handwritten message. "Truth always, remember? Ask your new boss why he really chose you. A friend." Her face paled slightly. Helen, noticing the change, approached. "Bad news?" "No." "I don't know," Clara replied, putting the card away. "Probably nothing important." But the seed of doubt was already planted. That night, as she prepared her outfit for the reopening, Clara couldn't stop thinking about the words of the mysterious message. Was there something Ethan hadn't told her? Some hidden reason behind his sudden interest in her? The morning of the big day dawned with a clear sky, as if Madrid itself wanted to celebrate the rebirth of the Garden of Dreams. Clara contemplated her reflection in the mirror. The new chef's uniform, with her name embroidered in gold thread, gave her an air of authority that still felt strange. "It's your moment, Clara," she told herself. "Don't let anything distract you." But as she headed to the restaurant, the anonymous card weighed in her pocket like a stone. The renovated Garden of Dreams shone under the soft lighting of wrought iron lamps that cast floral patterns on the freshly painted walls in earth tones and olive green. The tables, dressed in cream-colored tablecloths and centerpieces with live aromatic herbs, hosted the first diners on the reopening night. At the entrance, Helen greeted the guests with the elegance and warmth that had always characterized her management, before Gail sidelined her. Among the attendees were culinary critics, regular customers, and figures from Madrid's business world. All had come, moved by curiosity or skepticism, to witness the transformation of the traditional restaurant. In the kitchen, the atmosphere was one of absolute concentration. Clara directed her team with surgical precision, checking every dish before it went out. "More height in the presentation, Michael," she instructed. "And remember, the sauce should form a semicircle, not a puddle." Despite her apparent calm, an inner restlessness gnawed at her. She hadn't seen Ethan since her arrival, although she knew he was in the restaurant. The anonymous card continued to weigh on her conscience. She needed answers, but this night belonged to the diners. In the dining room, the first reactions began to arrive. A well-known critic couldn't contain an audible "mmm" upon tasting the lamb stew with lavender. 2 tables away, a couple looked at each other in astonishment after sampling the reinterpretation of the traditional gazpacho. Ethan watched everything from a discreet table in a corner. He didn't want the spotlight. This was Clara's night, Helen's, the teams who had worked tirelessly to revive his father's dream. Still, he couldn't help but feel an almost paternal pride, seeing how the diners enjoyed every bite, how the atmosphere had shifted from tense formality to genuine warmth. Halfway through the evening, the main door opened to allow entry to a man who attracted all eyes. Ernest Salazar, impeccable in his Italian suit, escorted Marcus Gale, whose face reflected a mixture of disdain and malice. Helen visibly tensed upon seeing them. "Mr. Salazar, we weren't expecting your visit," she said, maintaining her composure. "Do you have a reservation?" "I am a member of the board of directors, Ms. Matos. I don't need a reservation," he replied coldly. "We came to personally check if Mr. Alvarez's investment is justified." Ethan rose from his table and approached, his face expressionless but his eyes alert. "Ernest, Marcus, what a surprise. I assume you're here to enjoy the gastronomy, not to create a spectacle." Gale smiled maliciously. "We just wanted to see what your protégé has done with the restaurant, and personally congratulate you on your good taste." The double meaning of his words was evident. Ethan remained calm. "Please join me at my table. Helen, make sure they receive our best attention." In the kitchen, a waiter informed Clara of the arrival of the unexpected visitors. Her heart sped up. Could Gale have sent the note? What did he know that she didn't? "Michael, handle the next services," she instructed. "I need to step out for a moment." In the dining room, the tension at Ethan's table was palpable. Salazar examined every detail with a critical eye, while Gale barely concealed his scorn. "I must admit, the decor has improved," Salazar commented, "but I wonder if the numbers will justify such expense, and if the board will approve your particular interest in this project." Ethan was about to respond when Clara appeared by the table. She carried a dish that was not on the menu. "Good evening, gentlemen," she greeted them professionally. "I've prepared something special for you." She placed a dish before them, whose presentation drew murmurs of approval from nearby tables. It was a creation combining traditional elements with modern techniques, culminating in a culinary work of art. "I've called it Truth in Three Textures," and she explained. "I hope you enjoy it." Gale looked at her with disdain. "Are you inventing pretentious names for simple dishes now, Clara? I remember when you served tables without complaint." She held his gaze without blinking. "People evolve, Mr. Gale, some upwards, others well," she left the sentence unfinished. "If you'll excuse me, I must return to the kitchen. There is a room full of customers waiting." As she retreated, she felt Ethan's gaze on her, a look that contained something more than professional admiration, something that made the words on the anonymous card resonate more strongly. The night progressed towards its climax. The star dessert, the revamped flan with orange sauce, had conquered even the most demanding palates, and then, as the last diners prepared to leave, Gale made his move. "Before we go," he said loudly, attracting the attention of those present, "I think everyone should know the real reason why we are here tonight." Ethan tensed, recognizing the threat in his tone. "This is neither the time nor the place, Marcus." "On the contrary," Gale smiled maliciously, "it is exactly the time for everyone to know why Ms. Morales went from waitress to executive chef in record time, and why you, Ethan Alvarez, have invested a fortune in this dying restaurant." A murmur ran through the room. Clara froze, her cheeks burning. The anonymous card, Ethan's attention, everything seemed to fit into a narrative of favoritism and manipulation. Ethan slowly stood up, his face impassive, but his eyes glowing with an intensity few had seen. "Are you finished, Marcus?" he asked in a controlled voice. "I'm just getting started," Gale replied, savoring the moment. "I have proof, photographs of your meetings, testimonies." "I'm not referring to your accusations," Ethan interrupted him. "I'm referring to your dessert, because before you continue, I'd like everyone to taste something very special." He gestured, and Helen appeared with a cart where a golden cake rested, decorated with a simple sugar magnolia. "This," Ethan said, raising his voice so everyone could hear him, "is the cake of memory, original creation of Antonio Alvarez, my father. A dessert he only prepared on very special occasions and whose recipe was lost with his death, or so we thought." A new murmur ran through the room. The older diners recognized the legendary dessert that had made the restaurant famous decades ago. "Ms. Morales," Ethan continued, "found the recipe in an old notebook and managed to perfectly recreate it, adding that personal touch that only great chefs possess. That is the reason for my interest in her, her extraordinary talent and her ability to honor a legacy. He paused and looked directly at Gale. As for your accusations, Marcus, you'll allow me to be slightly amused before answering them. Ethan pulled an envelope from his jacket and handed it to Helen, who opened it and began to read in a clear voice. Resignation letter from Marcus Gale dated 5 years ago, addressed to Antonio Alvarez. Dear Sir, I am forced to leave my position as a kitchen assistant due to the intolerable working conditions and your refusal to recognize my culinary talent. Someday you will regret having underestimated me. Gale's eyes widened in horror. Ethan continued, My father kept every letter, Marcus, even those from resentful former employees who returned years later when he was too ill to recognize them, to seize control of the restaurant that had rejected them. He turned to Clara, whose expression reflected confusion and astonishment. Miss Morales, I hired you because I saw in you what my father would have seen. Passion, talent and respect for tradition, without fear of innovation. The same qualities that Marcus Gale never possessed, no matter how hard he tried. Gale abruptly stood up, his face contorted with rage. This is defamation. I'll sue you, Alvarez. I would advise against it, Ethan replied calmly. I have all your negative evaluations as a kitchen assistant, as well as the reports on how you manipulated the accounts when you returned as manager, not to mention the testimonies of workplace harassment that you so cleverly concealed. He turned to Salazar, who watched the scene with growing discomfort. As for you, Ernest, the board of directors has already been informed of your collaboration with Gale and how you attempted to sabotage this project for personal reasons. Your letter of resignation is waiting in my office. The silence in the room was absolute. Ethan then addressed the diners. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this unfortunate incident. To compensate you, the cake of memory will be served to everyone courtesy of the house, and I assure you it will be worth the wait. As Helen and the waiters distributed slices of the legendary cake, Ethan approached Clara, who remained motionless, processing everything that had happened. I'm sorry you had to witness that, he said quietly. That wasn't how I planned to explain it to you. Explain what exactly? She asked, regaining her composure. Why I chose you, why I trusted you with barely knowing you, he replied. The night I first came when I heard you murmur, just another day in hell. I saw in your eyes the same disappointment my father felt when the restaurant began to lose its soul. And when I tasted your flan with orange sauce, I recognized the technique he taught his most promising apprentices. Clara looked at him in astonishment. How could you know that technique? Ethan smiled wistfully. Because I grew up in this kitchen, Clara. Before being a businessman, I was the son who watched his father's every move among the stoves. I would recognize his influence in any dish anywhere in the world. The pieces began to fit together for Clara. It wasn't favoritism or attraction that had motivated Ethan, but the recognition of a talent that connected with his deepest roots. The Garden of Dreams, she murmured. It was my father's dream, he completed. And now, thanks to you, it is flourishing again. Around them, the diners savored the cake of memory with expressions of delight and nostalgia. What had begun as a scandal was transforming into a celebration of rebirth and continuity. The days following the reopening passed in a whirlwind of activity. Enthusiastic reviews in the press and social media had turned the Garden of Dreams into the most sought-after restaurant in Madrid. Reservations for the reopening extended 3 months out, and every night the room was filled with diners eager to taste Clara's creations and revive the magic of the legendary restaurant. In the kitchen, the atmosphere had completely changed. Where fear and tension once reigned, creativity and camaraderie now flourished. Michael, who had initially been skeptical of Clara's leadership, had become her most fervent supporter and collaborator. I never thought I'd say this, he commented one afternoon as they prepared the mise en place, but thanks to you, I've fallen back in love with cooking. Clara smiled, grateful for his words. We are a team, Michael. Every dish that leaves this kitchen carries a bit of all of us. The only one who seemed to maintain a certain distance was Ethan. After the incident on reopening night, his visits to the restaurant had become less frequent and more formal. He limited himself to follow-up meetings with Helen and brief appearances in the kitchen to taste the new dishes. The complicity that had begun to develop between him and Clara seemed to have vanished, replaced by a professional courtesy that hurt more than any coldness. One Sunday afternoon, with the restaurant closed, Clara stayed alone in the kitchen, experimenting with new recipes for the autumn menu. The silence of the usually bustling place allowed her to think clearly. She was so concentrated that she didn't hear the door open. "Working on a Sunday? That's dedication," a familiar voice said. Clara started and turned to find Ethan, dressed casually in jeans and a blue shirt that softened his usually serious features. "Mr. Alvarez, I wasn't expecting to see you today," she replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "Ethan, please," he corrected with a shy smile. "After everything we've been through, I think we can drop the formalities." He approached the workbench where Clara had arranged various ingredients and steaming pots. "May I ask what you're working on?" She hesitated for a moment, but then pointed to a small saucepan where a dark aromatic liquid was reducing. "I'm trying to recreate a sauce my grandmother prepared in Salamanca. She made it with regional wine and herbs from her garden," she explained. "I want to incorporate it into the autumn menu but adapt it to our concept." Ethan watched the process with interest, leaning closer to better appreciate the aromas. "It smells like home," he commented, closing his eyes for an instant. "Like memory." "That's exactly what I'm aiming for," Clara nodded. "For every dish to evoke a memory, even for those who haven't experienced it." They looked at each other for a moment, rediscovering the connection that seemed to have been lost. "I've been avoiding you," Ethan finally admitted, "and it's not fair to you." Clara stopped what she was doing and looked at him directly. "Why?" Ethan leaned against the counter, searching for the right words. "Because Gale, in his malice, touched a truth I wasn't ready to face," he confessed. "I didn't hire you for romantic reasons, as he insinuated. I hired you for your talent, your vision, and your connection to the essence of this place. But, she insisted when he paused. "But over time, working together, seeing you transform this place," Ethan took a deep breath. "I found myself admiring not only the chef, but the person, and that complicated our professional relationship." Clara felt her heart accelerate but maintained her composure. "And you decided to distance yourself?" "I thought it was the right thing to do," he replied. "I didn't want anything to tarnish your success or cast doubt on your merits. You had already suffered enough injustices in your career." Clara nodded, understanding his reasoning even if she didn't share it. She picked up a spoon, dipped it into the sauce, and offered it to Ethan. "Try this," she requested. He did, and his eyes lit up with surprise and pleasure. "It's extraordinary," he said sincerely. "Complex yet comforting, like a hug on a cold day." "Sometimes," Clara said, holding his gaze, "what seems to complicate things is exactly what gives them meaning. Like this sauce. It seems simple, but it has 20 different ingredients, each fulfilling its function." Ethan understood the metaphor. With a slow gesture, he took Clara's hand, stained with flour and spices. "I've been so worried about doing the right thing that I forgot to ask how you felt," he confessed. "And perhaps that was the most incorrect thing of all." She smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. "I think we've both been cooking with the wrong recipe," she replied. "Maybe it's time to improvise a little." At that moment, in the tranquility of an empty kitchen on a Sunday, a new recipe emerged, one that wasn't written on any menu, but promised to be the most satisfying of all. A year after that reopening night, the Garden of Dreams had blossomed beyond all expectations. The morning the most prestigious gastronomic guide in Spain awarded the restaurant its first star, with special mention to the extraordinary fusion of tradition and innovation that characterized Clara Morales's cuisine. The phone did not stop ringing. Helen, with her characteristic efficiency, had organized a small celebration before opening the doors to the public. The entire team, from the cooks to the cleaning staff, gathered in the main dining room, where glasses of Spanish cava awaited to be raised in a collective toast. "Silence, please," Helen requested, gently tapping her glass with a spoon. "Today is a day that will be etched in the history of this place." Expectant faces turned towards her. Some of the oldest employees had contained tears in their eyes. They had lived through the dark years and were now witnessing the rebirth. When Antonio Alvarez founded this restaurant 40 years ago, he dreamed of a place where food was more than sustenance, Helen continued. He wanted to create experiences, awaken memories, weave stories with flavors. Today, thanks to all of you, that dream has been reborn, stronger than ever. She raised her glass high, and everyone imitated her. "To the Garden of Dreams," she proclaimed, her eyes shining with emotion. "And to everyone who made this miracle possible." "To Clara," added Michael, the chef who had initially been skeptical of female leadership in his kitchen, "who taught us that dreams can flourish even in barren soil." A murmur of approval ran through the room. Clara, visibly moved, shook her head as eyes turned toward her. "To all of us," she corrected, raising her glass. "A star doesn't shine alone. It needs a firmament." The clinking of glass filled. The air followed by hugs and congratulations. Ethan, who had remained discreetly at the back of the room, watched the scene with a mix of pride and nostalgia. Seeing his father's restaurant regain its glory was a personal victory, but also a reminder of unfillable absences. While the others continued celebrating, Clara noticed his expression and separated from the group to approach him. "You look lost in thought," she commented, offering him a glass of cava she had retrieved from a nearby tray. "I was thinking about my father," Ethan confessed, "how he would have loved to be here today. He always believed this place deserved recognition, not for prestige, but for the honesty of its cuisine." Clara nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "I propose something," she said, taking his hand naturally. "Come with me." She guided him across the room, skirting animated conversations, until they reached the corner, where the walls now featured black and white photographs of the restaurant's early years. Among them stood out an image of the founder, Antonio Alvarez, proudly holding a dish of his creation, with a smile that reflected the same one that now occasionally lit up his son's face. "He is here," Clara affirmed softly. "In every recipe we've recovered, in every detail you've protected, in every story we tell our diners." Ethan contemplated the photograph, allowing himself a moment of vulnerability he rarely showed. "Sometimes when I taste your dishes, I feel his presence," he confessed. "It's as if you've captured his essence without ever having met him." "He would have loved to see you today," Clara replied. "He always believed cooking was a form of poetry, didn't he?" Ethan looked at her, surprised. "How do you know that?" "He wrote it in his recipe book," she explained. "Cooking is poetry for the palate. Each dish, a verse that speaks of its creator. I found it so beautiful that I adopted it as my personal philosophy." They stood in silence for a moment, gazing at the photographs that narrated decades of history. Around them, the murmur of the celebration continued, but they had created a small oasis of intimacy. "I have something for you," Ethan said suddenly, pulling a small blue velvet box from his pocket. "I planned to give it to you tonight after the service, but I think this is the right moment." Clara looked at him curiously, accepting the box. Upon opening it, she held her breath. Inside rested a silver brooch in the shape of a magnolia, delicately crafted with details that captured the texture of each petal and the soft curve of the bud about to open. "It's extraordinary," she murmured, reverently touching the jewel with her fingers. "It belonged to my mother," Ethan explained. "The magnolia was her favorite flower. It symbolizes dignity and perseverance, qualities she admired and that I see in you every day." He paused, searching for the exact words. "In our family, there's a tradition that this piece is given to someone who demonstrates not only talent, but soul. My father gave it to my mother when the restaurant began to prosper, recognizing that without her support, nothing would have been possible. With delicacy, he took the brooch and pinned it to the lapel of Clara's chef uniform. To remind you that dreams also bloom in winter," he said, repeating the words that had become the restaurant's unofficial motto. Clara felt the weight of the jewel against her chest, not for its grams of silver, but for the significance it carried. Their eyes met, communicating without words everything that had blossomed between them in these months. Their relationship, initially born of professional respect, had evolved into something deeper and more complex, like one of the fusion dishes she created, unexpected but perfectly balanced. The intimate moment was interrupted when Michael approached, with an apologetic expression for the intrusion. "Clara, the journalists have arrived. They are setting up their cameras in the kitchen, as agreed." She nodded, returning to reality. "Thank you, Michael. I'll be there in a minute." When they were alone again, Ethan smiled with a certain resignation. "Duty calls. Go dazzle them with your culinary genius." Clara nodded, but before leaving she leaned in and placed a soft kiss on Ethan's cheek, a simple gesture, yet charged with promise. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did," she whispered. The interview took place in the restaurant's immaculate kitchen. Clara, in her impeccable uniform and the magnolia brooch gleaming under the lights, explained the concept behind her creations to the prestigious culinary journalist while preparing the famous flan with orange sauce live, which had captivated the critics. "What we seek is not to impress but to move," she explained, her hands moving with hypnotic precision. "Every dish tells a story, of a place, of a tradition, of a shared memory." "And what is the story behind this particular dessert?" the journalist asked, pointing to the flan taking shape. Clara smiled, gently stirring the orange sauce that bubbled with a citrus aroma. "It's a story of rebirth," she replied. "Like this restaurant, it started as a simple, traditional recipe, but by adding new elements, by respecting its essence while exploring new possibilities, it transforms into something that honors the past while looking to the future." Ethan, watching from a corner, felt a wave of pride. Clara had not only revolutionized the kitchen, she had perfectly understood and articulated the philosophy his father had tried to instill in him for years. When the interview ended and the journalists began to pack up their equipment, Ethan's phone vibrated in his pocket. Upon answering, his expression transformed into one of surprise and then satisfaction. "I understand. Yes, of course, we will be prepared. It is an honor," he said before hanging up. Clara, who had approached after seeing off the journalists, looked at him questioningly. "Good news." "It was the mayor's office," Ethan explained, putting the phone away. "He wants to organize an official dinner here next month, a reception for foreign ambassadors and culture ministers." "My God!" Clara exclaimed, feeling a mix of excitement and vertigo. "That is huge. Apparently, the Garden of Dreams has become a symbol of the cultural renewal of this neighborhood," Ethan continued. "They want to show their guests how Madrid is reclaiming its gastronomic heritage without giving up innovation." Clara processed the news with a mix of pride and responsibility that showed on her expressive face. "We'll have to create a special menu," she began to mentally plan, her mind already racing. "Something that represents not only our vision but the essence of Madrid, its neighborhoods, its history." Ethan smiled, recognizing in her that particular spark that appeared whenever a new culinary challenge presented itself. "You'll do it brilliantly, as always," he assured her, his confidence absolute. At that moment, Helen approached with a folder in her hands and an inscrutable expression. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, in a tone that suggested she genuinely regretted it, "but there's something you both need to see." She showed them a letter with the letterhead of a famous international hotel chain. In it, they offered Clara the position of executive chef for their new luxury establishment in Barcelona, with a salary double her current. One and carte blanche to create her own gastronomic concept. "It arrived this morning," Helen explained. "I didn't know whether to give it to you immediately or wait until the celebration was over." Clara read the letter carefully, while Ethan and Helen exchanged a worried glance. The offer was too good to ignore. International prestige, unlimited resources, total creative freedom. "What do you plan to do?" Ethan finally asked, trying to maintain a neutral tone, although his tension was evident in the slight rigidity of his shoulders. Clara carefully folded the letter and returned it to its envelope. "I'll think about it," she replied calmly. "It's an interesting opportunity." A shadow briefly crossed Ethan's face, but he quickly recovered. "Of course, take your time to consider it properly," he said professionally. "Meanwhile, we have a restaurant full of customers waiting to experience the magic of the Garden of Dreams." The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of activity. The restaurant opened its doors and diners, drawn by the news of the star, filled every table. The room vibrated with animated conversations, exclamations of pleasure at every dish, and that particular murmur that arises when a group of people shares a genuinely satisfying experience. Clara directed the kitchen with her usual precision and passion, but Ethan, observing her from the threshold separating the dining room from the stoves, noticed a spark of distraction in her eyes, as if her mind was exploring distant possibilities, different horizons from the ones they had shared these months. During service, Michael approached her as she prepared a dish. "Barcelona, huh?" he commented quietly, revealing that the news had leaked among the staff. "It's a big opportunity." Clara continued working, adding a reduction of Pedro Jimenez with millimeter precision around a lamb loin. "It is," she finally admitted, "but there are many factors to consider. Like leaving all of us orphaned, Michael joked, although there was a note of genuine concern in his voice. Or abandoning your garden just as it begins to bloom. Clara looked at him out of the corner of her eye with a half smile. I didn't know you had become a poet, Michael. The chef shrugged, smiling. What can I say? Your style is rubbing off on me. When the last customer had left and the dining room lights dimmed, Clara found herself alone in the kitchen, meticulously cleaning her workstation. It wasn't necessary. They had staff for that, but the ritual helped her order her thoughts. The Barcelona letter weighed on her mind. It was the kind of opportunity any chef would dream of. International recognition, unlimited resources, total freedom. However, something was holding her back, something deeper than contracts or salaries. Her reflections were interrupted when she noticed movement on the restaurant's back terrace. Through the windows she made out Ethan's silhouette, contemplating the starry Madrid sky. Drying her hands, she decided to join him. The night was surprisingly warm for the season, with a clear sky where the stars bravely competed with the city's light pollution. Ethan turned as he heard the door, a slight smile forming on his lips as he recognized her. Have you made a decision? He asked directly without preamble. Clara nodded, her gaze fixed on the firmament. The magnolia brooch caught the faint glow of the terrace lights. I have, she confirmed, but before I share it, I want you to answer a question. Of course. Clara turned to face him, her eyes searching for something deeper than rehearsed words. What is the Garden of Dreams to you? Not the business, not the legacy. What does it truly mean to you? Ethan reflected for a moment, surprised by the depth of the question. It wasn't an answer he could or wanted to manufacture. It's the place where I reconnected with my father, he finally replied, his voice softening. Where I understood that numbers on a balance sheet cannot measure the real value of things. Where I learned that dreams, like plants, need daily care and patience. He paused, confronting his own truth. And it's where I found you. The last words hung between them, loaded with a meaning that transcended the professional. Clara smiled, something in her expression relaxing as if she had found the confirmation she was looking for. Then you will understand my decision, she said, pulling the letter from her pocket. Before Ethan's attentive gaze, she tore it into small pieces that she let fall into a nearby planter where aromatic herbs grew. Paper seeds, she explained at his surprised expression, to remind us that sometimes what seems like the end of something is only the beginning of something better. Ethan looked at her with a mixture of relief and admiration he didn't try to hide. Are you sure? Barcelona would be a great opportunity, he insisted, needing to confirm that it wasn't a decision made on impulse or, worse, out of pity. I already have a great opportunity here, she replied with conviction. I have a garden to tend, dreams to cultivate, and people I value. Her eyes fixed on his. What more could I ask for? Under the blanket of Madrid stars, their hands met, intertwining fingers like someone intertwining destinies. There was no need for grand words or formal declarations, just the silent recognition that they had found, in each other and in the garden, they cultivated together, something too valuable to abandon. Besides, Clara added with a mischievous sparkle in her eyes, I still have to create that menu for the mayor and his guests, and I think I have an idea you'll love. Ethan smiled, intrigued. I'm listening. A journey through Madrid, through 14 dishes, she explained, her enthusiasm growing with every word, each one representing a different neighborhood of the city, with local ingredients and techniques that honor both tradition and innovation. And for dessert, the flan. With orange sauce, he completed. The dish that united us. She nodded, pleased that he understood. Exactly. Because in the end, everything comes back to the roots, don't you think? Ethan contemplated this extraordinary woman who had transformed not only his restaurant, but his own life, and he felt a gratitude that went beyond words. To the roots, he confirmed, raising a hand to gently caress the magnolia brooch adorning Clara's dress. And to the flowers that spring from them. A year. After that reopening night, the Garden of Dreams had transformed into much more than a prestigious restaurant. It had become a cultural benchmark, a meeting point where tradition and innovation dialogued in perfect balance. The 2 stars it now sported, the second obtained just 6 months after the first, had attracted diners from all over the world, but it was the stories each dish told that made them return again and again. The restaurant had grown, not only in reputation, but in physical space. Ethan had acquired the adjacent building to expand the kitchen and create a small urban vegetable garden on the rooftop, where they cultivated aromatic herbs, edible flowers, and delicate vegetables that went directly from the earth to the plate. Every morning before Madrid was fully awake, Clara went up to that green oasis to personally collect the fresh ingredients that would inspire the menu of the day. On this special afternoon, the restaurant was closed to the public. The tables had been rearranged in a U-shape around a central space where a small platform awaited, decorated with flowering vines that created a natural arch. Alvarez Group employees, from executives to maintenance staff, chatted animatedly while awaiting the start of the event. The news had spread like wildfire. A momentous change in the restaurant's structure would be officially announced today. In the kitchen, temporarily turned into a makeshift waiting room, Michael adjusted the bow tie of his suit while recounting to the younger cooks what it had been like working under Gail's regime. "I'm telling you, I lived through those dark times," he explained, gesturing dramatically. "Coming to work was like descending into the mines. No light, no air, no hope. And then she arrived." "Michael, don't exaggerate," Helen interrupted him, passing by at that moment overseeing the final details. "It wasn't Dante's Inferno either." "Almost," the chef insisted. "I remember the day Clara started as a waitress. We all thought, what is this girl doing here? You can tell her training from a mile away." But Gail kept her serving tables, as if he wanted to punish her for her talent. Helen nodded, recalling those days. It was evident she had knowledge, the way she described dishes to customers, how she suggested pairings, even how she held the cutlery betrayed her training. "And look at her now," Michael concluded with paternal pride, even though he was only a few years older than Clara. "From a waitress to co-owner. That's what I call a story of overcoming." In the small office they shared at the back of the restaurant, Ethan finished reviewing some documents. He wore a pearl grey suit that highlighted the silver at his temples, a sign of an intense but gratifying year. His face, which used to show the permanent tension of the executive, now reflected the serenity of someone who has found his true purpose. When Clara entered, he looked up, and his face lit up involuntarily. "You look beautiful," he said sincerely. She looked at herself, still unaccustomed to the elegant emerald green dress she had chosen for the occasion. The color highlighted her olive skin tone and contrasted magnificently with the magnolia brooch that, as always, was pinned close to her heart. "I feel strange without my uniform," she confessed, running her hands over the soft fabric, "as if something is missing." Ethan stood up and approached, admiring not only her physical beauty, but the inner transformation reflected in her posture, in the confidence of her gaze. "Today you are not the chef," he reminded her softly. "You are the protagonist." The nerves Clara felt dissipated under his reassuring gaze. In this year, they had learned to communicate with small gestures and knowing glances, developing a language of their own, as rich and complex as the recipes they created together. "Are the papers ready?" she asked, trying to focus on practical aspects to calm her anxiety. Ethan nodded, pointing to a folder on the desk with the Alvarez Group's gold logo. "Already, only the signatures are missing." A brief silence ensued, charged with meaning. Both were aware that this step transcended the professional, consolidating an association that had begun as a risky gamble and had become the most fruitful alliance of their lives. "Do you remember the first day?" Clara asked suddenly, a nostalgic smile forming on her lips. "When you came in and asked for the dish of the day?" Ethan laughed, nodding. "And you murmured, 'Just another day in hell,' without knowing I was listening." Life has a peculiar sense of humor, she reflected. Those desperate words were actually the beginning of everything. Ethan took her hands in his expression turning serious. "Have you ever regretted it?" he asked. "Staying here, turning down Barcelona?" He left the sentence incomplete, but both knew what he was referring to. Clara shook her head without hesitation. "Not for a single day," she replied firmly. "Some people spend their lives looking for their place in the world. I found mine among these stoves, with these people, with you." Before Ethan could respond, gentle knocks on the door announced Helen's presence. "It's time," she announced with a knowing smile upon seeing their clasped hands. "Everyone is waiting." At 7 sharp, the murmur of conversations ceased when Michael tapped a crystal glass with the handle of a knife. All eyes turned toward the small platform where Ethan took his position with Clara by his side. The warm light from the artisan lamps, specifically designed for the renovated restaurant, created an intimate atmosphere despite the gathered crowd. "Thank you all for joining us on this very special day," Ethan began, his voice clear in the expectant silence. "Exactly 1 year ago, the Garden of Dreams was reborn from its ashes. Many doubted that a traditional restaurant could reinvent itself without losing its essence." He paused, looking significantly toward some former board members who, after the success, had changed their stance. Some even bet on its failure. A murmur ran through the room, recalling the times of uncertainty. "But what they didn't understand," Ethan continued, "is that gardens are not built in a day. They need time, care, and above all, the right hand to flourish." He extended an arm toward Clara, inviting her to step forward. She did so, with a mixture of shyness and pride that captivated those present. "Clara Morales not only saved this restaurant," Ethan continued, his voice taking on a warmer tone. "She gave it back its soul. She transformed recipes into stories, diners into friends, and a declining business into a united family. That's why, today, I want to officially announce 2 important pieces of news." An expectant silence filled the room. Even those who had heard rumors leaned slightly forward, anxious for the official confirmation. "First, the Alvarez Group will launch a foundation to support young culinary talents without resources," he announced, prompting murmurs of approval. "The Antonio Alvarez Foundation will offer full scholarships and paid internships in our restaurants, ensuring that no talent is lost due to lack of opportunity." Enthusiastic applause greeted the news. Ethan had conceived this project directly inspired by the story of Clara and so many other talented chefs whose careers had been thwarted by economic or social obstacles. "The second piece of news," he continued when the applause subsided, "is even more personal and significant." He paused, looking directly at Clara. "As of today, Clara Morales will not only be the executive chef of the Garden of Dreams, but also a co-owner." A murmur of surprise and admiration ran through the room. Although some expected it, hearing it officially conferred a tangible reality on the news that moved even the most skeptical. Clara, though aware of the announcement, couldn't help her eyes welling up. Ethan handed her the folder they had reviewed earlier. "This restaurant was always more than a business," he continued, now addressing everyone present. "For my father, Antonio, it was a dream come true. For me, for a long time, it was a connection to my roots that I didn't fully appreciate. And thanks to Clara," his voice softened as he pronounced her name, "it has become a home for all of us." Clara took the floor, her voice slightly shaky at first, but gaining firmness as she spoke. "When I arrived at this restaurant as a waitress, I couldn't imagine the journey that awaited me," she said, her gaze sweeping over the attentive faces. "I had lost faith in my vocation after too many closed doors, too many no's that seemed to define my worth." She paused, remembering those days of hopelessness. "I learned that sometimes we have to lose our way to find our true path," she continued. "That dignity resides not in what we do, but in how we do it. And above all, that dreams, like the most beautiful flowers, often sprout in the most unexpected places." Her words resonated especially with the employees who had lived through the transformation, who had gone from working under constant fear to flourishing in an environment of respect and creativity. "This is not my achievement," Clara emphasized. "It is our collective achievement. Everyone in this room has contributed to making the Garden of Dreams what it is today, a space where excellence and humanity go hand in hand." She opened the folder and signed the documents with a steady hand, aware of the historical significance of the moment. Ethan did the same, and then, in a gesture that surprised many but seemed perfectly natural to those who knew them well, he leaned in to seal the agreement with a kiss that spoke of a commitment transcending the professional. The applause erupted again, this time accompanied by cheers and congratulations that reflected the genuine affection both had earned. The celebration continued with a dinner prepared by Clara's team, each dish telling a part of the restaurant's history, from Antonio's classic recipes to the innovative creations of the new era. The menu was an emotional journey through time. It began with a reinterpretation of the first dish Antonio Alvarez included in the original menu, continued with creations that marked different stages of the restaurant, and culminated with the legendary flan with orange sauce that was now served with an edible gold leaf forming a small magnolia on its surface. As the guests enjoyed the feast, sharing memories and anecdotes, Ethan and Clara found a moment of tranquility on the small terrace where they had shared so many meaningful conversations. The Madrid sky unfolded above them like a purple cloak sprinkled with timid stars. "Do you know the most curious thing?" Clara reflected, contemplating the illuminated city stretching to the horizon. "When I murmured, 'Just another day in hell' that morning, I never imagined I was about to find my paradise." Ethan smiled, remembering that first encounter that had changed the course of their lives. "Sometimes we have to hit rock bottom to propel ourselves upwards," he replied. "As you said today, dreams, like the most beautiful flowers, often sprout in the most unexpected places." Clara looked at him curiously, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Are you quoting my own words?" "I'm making them my own," he corrected with a smile. "Just as you made my father's legacy yours, transforming it into something new and wonderful." From inside came the laughter and conversations of their friends and colleagues, soft music, and the clinking of glasses. The life they had built together, dish by dish, day by day, was manifested in that symphony of sounds that spoke of community and belonging. "What comes next?" Clara asked, resting her head on Ethan's shoulder with a naturalness that evidenced the intimacy developed between them. He contemplated the starry sky before answering, genuinely considering the question. He was not a man of improvised plans, but he had learned that some of the best moments in life arose precisely from the unexpected. "We will continue cultivating this garden," he said softly, "and perhaps in time we will plant others." His hand found Clara's, intertwining their fingers, but always remembering that the most valuable flower is the one that grows among stones, overcoming every obstacle with grace and determination. Clara smiled, recognizing in his words the reflection of her own journey. "Like the magnolia," she murmured, touching the silver brooch on her dress, "that blooms even in the harshest winters." "Exactly," Ethan nodded, "because in the end, it is not the applause or the recognition that endures. It is the dignity with which we face each day, the humility with which we receive every achievement, and the wisdom to recognize that our true worth is not in what we have, but in what we sow." A soft tapping on the glass interrupted their conversation. Helen peeked through the half-open door. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said with a smile that contradicted her words, "but they are about to serve the special dessert, and everyone expects you to present it together." They exchanged a knowing glance and stood up, preparing to return to the warm embrace of their community. Before entering, Clara paused for a moment. "Do you know what Michael told me this morning?" she commented. "That he had never seen a restaurant with so much soul, that even on the busiest days there's something here that makes the effort worthwhile." Ethan nodded, understanding perfectly. "It's what my father always tried to create. Not just a successful business, but a place with a heart of its own." "We've achieved it," Clara affirmed, with the certainty of someone who has reached a vital goal. "And it's only the beginning." As they returned to the dining room, where smiling faces and the emblematic dessert that symbolized their union awaited them, Clara had a profound certainty. The true garden they had cultivated was not made of plants or recipes, but of human connections, of second chances, of shared dreams that, like stubborn seeds, had found a way to flourish, even in the most improbable soil. And that night, as the famous flan with orange sauce was served to the guests under the warm light of the renovated restaurant, every bite seemed to tell a story of perseverance, every sip of the citrus sauce a reminder that the deepest sweetness often comes after the bitterness. In a discreet corner of the room, the photograph of Antonio Alvarez seemed to observe the scene with silent approval, as if he knew that his vision had not died with him, but had found new guardians who had transformed it without betraying it. Under the starry cloak of Madrid, the Garden of Dreams shone like a beacon of hope and renewal, and within its walls, the most beautiful of all creations blossomed, the story of two people who, from opposite shores, had found the path to cultivate a garden of infinite possibilities together. Because some flowers, like some dreams, are not meant to wither. They are permanent flowers that, once they take root in the right heart, continue to bloom, season after season, reminding us that even the harshest winters eventually give way to a new spring.